Hey everyone, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're pulling back the curtain on the realities hidden within the recent DOJ Epstein file releases. We're looking specifically at the intensely revealing first-hand testimony from survivor and visual artist Reena O. We're going to use the details she shared to map out exactly how this operation functioned from the inside.
His goal was to break our souls. Just let that sink in for a second. That simple quote immediately reframes everything about the true depth of Epstein's crimes. As we'll see, this was never just about physical abuse. It was a deeply calculated, multi-layered dismantling of a person's spirit. Reena's account really forces us to shift our focus from just what happened to the incredibly dark psychology of how and why it happened. Now, before we really get going, I do have to give a quick heads up. This explainer covers some very graphic and highly sensitive realities of manipulation and abuse, drawn straight from these first-hand accounts, so please use discretion as we navigate through this dark but super important subject. Section 1. The Art Patron Illusion, Deceptive Beginnings, and the Facade of Philanthropy. So how exactly does a trap like this get set? How does someone so dangerous pull young women into his orbit? Well, it moved terrifyingly fast. On day 1 of Reena's encounters, she was introduced by a mutual friend. By day 3, she was brought to his New York residence, a place she describes as dimly lit, heavily guarded, with absolutely no visible windows. He quickly flipped through her portfolio of biblical sculptures, and by day 5, almost immediately offered her a full college scholarship. He explicitly promised her that this money had, quote, no strings attached. He even told her she'd never have to see him again once she accepted it. But in reality, that was a complete lie. By funding her undergraduate degree, he was actually establishing a strict 4-year tether. It was a highly calculated move designed to lock her into long-term abuse while looking like this massive charitable gift. And the control was just absolute right from the jump. Reena couldn't just walk around freely. She was constantly escorted everywhere by a formal, silent butler who never even introduced himself. And that scholarship? It wasn't exactly a blank check for her dreams. She desperately wanted to go to Parsons School of Design, but Epstein literally dictated that she attend the School of Visual Arts instead. He controlled the money, the location, and her physical movements.
Section 2. Building the Babylon Harem, Uncovering the Twisted Ideology.
So this whole generous scholarship facade quickly morphed into a terrifying, highly orchestrated ideology. Epstein wasn't just isolating his victims, he was actively indoctrinating them. He started handing Reena all these books to read, essentially brainwashing her into his twisted vision of a polygamous empire. He called this empire Babylon, and he viewed himself as its sultan. Reena, whose art was deeply influenced by studying cathedral sculpture, immediately recognized Babylon as the biblical symbol for the unholy. She sincerely believes his goal was to bring the exact opposite of heaven to earth. The way he manipulated her is just chilling. Reena had created this beautiful, holy sculpture depicting the innocent adoration of a mother and child. Epstein took a bizarre, intense liking to it, and then he completely twisted it. Based on that innocent piece of art, he demanded that she become one of his wives and carry his baby. He essentially weaponized her own artwork against her. Which brings up a massive, disturbing question. When we look at the DOJ emails from these files mentioning things like designer babies and human cloning, you have to wonder. Was his entire philanthropic art patron persona just a total front? Was he simply using it as a vehicle to scout candidates for a dark obsession with seeding the human race? Section 3. Ghislaine Maxwell and the Hierarchy, the Enablers and the Rigid Social Ladder. Let's shift gears and look down in Florida for a minute. Reena maps out this incredibly rigid, cult-like hierarchy. At the very bottom, isolated victims like herself were literally trapped without access to transportation, totally confined to the house. Right in the middle were the hired employees, like Virginia Giuffre and Yana, who had rotational access and were paid by Maxwell. And then, sitting at the absolute top, dictating the whole structure, were Epstein and Maxwell, with total control.
Reena describes Ghislaine Maxwell as an absolute, severe classist. To the girls trapped at the bottom, she was completely unapproachable. Reena recounts this one horrifying memory where Maxwell actually grinned while showing her a literal closet full of disgusting items used to physically assault victims. Furthermore, Maxwell's sense of entitlement was so extreme, she allegedly wanted to use a surrogate for a child, not out of medical necessity, but simply so she wouldn't get pregnancy stretch marks.
To put this captivity into perspective, think about the stark contrast between those two realities. You've got Maxwell freely coming and going from the New York townhouse, totally unbothered. Meanwhile, the victims were stuck waiting around for a mere 1-hour privilege just to walk outside. And even then, they had to walk physically behind their abusers to reinforce their absolute lower status. Section 4. Spiritual and narcissistic abuse, the 3 layers of trauma.
Now, what's truly essential to understand from Reena's account is that the abuse went way, way beyond the physical realm. She actually spent years studying malignant narcissism just to make sense of what happened to her. She categorizes the abuse into 3 distinct layers. First, you have the physical trauma. Then there's the mental brainwashing, what she calls colonizing the brain. But the ultimate layer, the one she emphasizes the most, is the spiritual abuse.
Her takeaway here is just devastating, as she powerfully states it. Breaking the soul was his goal. Epstein wasn't just satisfied with physical dominance. He actually reveled in sacrilege and blasphemy. He found his ultimate high in completely dismantling the core human spirit of his victims. That is the true terrifying depth of the darkness she witnessed.
And you don't just walk away from something like that. Even decades later, Reena notes that this severe, multi-layered trauma remains stored physically in the body. It doesn't just fade away. It requires extensive therapeutic intervention, and she works with various providers, including equine therapy, just to physically and mentally cope with having her spirit completely dismantled.
Finally, Section 5, the call for justice, activism, and looking forward.
Despite everything, and I mean despite ongoing harassment, stalking, and actual drones hovering outside her window to this day, which is just insane, Reena is turning all of that trauma into some fierce activism. She's calling for citizens to organize peaceful marches across all 50 states. She's loudly demanding that it's not enough for powerful enablers to simply resign from Fortune 500 companies or Ivy League schools. She wants full financial and criminal investigations with real search and seizures. And she's continuing to speak out through her upcoming podcast, Revelations with Reena O.
To put the sheer scale of this underground darkness into context, consider this staggering number: 40 million. That is the estimated number of people who go missing globally every single year to trafficking. It's a vast shadow network that Reena sincerely believes Epstein's operations were deeply connected to.
And that leaves us with one incredibly chilling final thought. Based on everything we see in these DOJ files and these super detailed survivor testimonies about the hierarchy and the coercion, if only a tiny fraction of his enablers have faced actual justice, how many people currently sitting in positions of immense power in the United States are still completely compromised today? It's a massive question that demands an answer. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the narrative.